So how comfortable are you with death, suffering, tragedy, misfortune, all of that stuff? Chances are, if you're like me and most of the people listening in the West, UK, Europe, America, whatever, and a lot of the world, that chances are you're not that comfortable with it. It's a taboo. It's you might say for obvious reasons, stuff that we don't like. We don't like death, we don't like suffering, we don't like any of that stuff. We prefer life, prefer being alive over being dead, shall we say. No, I'm being trite there, but the questions around how we deal with all of them things from that side of the spectrum, upon inspection, it's our, say, unhealthy relationship to those things that leads to lots of confusion in lots of other different areas of life. So I'll give you a few for instances, but let's just say first, it's a cultural thing. It's more of its time and place, this attitude we've got towards death and suffering. It seems that never before in history have we valued youth, aliveness, and devalued by that reasoning old age, and with that we devalue wisdom and we devalue the past. You know, we seem to be on this linear trajectory of we're getting better and better, cleverer and cleverer, which is again interesting when you put that under scrutiny. So it's all about, and if you look at the forward march of all of the industries that create the most money and the most wealth these days, the people within those industries, such as tech, for example, technology, are all getting younger and younger. So yeah, it's a cultural thing, and other cultures have before now, and now in this age, but in other places, in other cultures, have a different relationship to death, suffering, tragedy, whatever it is. And you can see from that, by extension, their attitudes towards certain things are different. So as I say, I'll give you a few examples. So we've got the whole issue of animal rights, how we eat in terms of lifestyle, certain choices of eating animals, not eating animals, being comfortable, certain kinds of animals. Yeah, I have to stop for a second just then, because just as I walked around the corner saying eating animals, there was someone right there, so I thought it best to not scare them so much, shall we say. Okay, yeah, so we've got our lifestyle choices in terms of how we eat, and it's good, things are starting to change, because what's happening is, on the one hand, seem to be getting more and more awareness about the sentience of animals, and we're starting to recognise that animals or other creatures are much more alive or aware or sentient or able to feel suffering than what we previously thought. So it's like, so that's a good thing, it's moving further away from just seeing all of animals as beneath us and not worth our respect, and consequently the rise in vegetarianism, veganism and all that stuff just shows that, and that's great, and that's true and right and brilliant. Of course, other living beings do feel pain, do have suffering, and it is right that we start to become more aware of that. Okay, however, what we're starting to do, it looks like, is we're starting to say anything that's alive. Okay, let's just like sort of fast forward on the trajectory. It will end up like anything that's alive, there should be no harm, pain or death inflicted on that by us unnecessarily. So lots of people in the woods today. Anyway, yeah, the trajectory is unnecessary suffering. We've got to eradicate that. But it's this word unnecessary where the gold is, if you like, because how do you define unnecessary? Now at the minute it seems like the trajectory is we just can't take the life of any other living being. And you might not think that that's where it's going, but there are these conversations being had at the minute. We can't do that. It's impossible to live in such a way that we eradicate all human caused suffering of other life forms, other beings. You know, the levels of life go from large to very, very small and microscopic, and life is dying, suffering every second of every day, in order that the bigger picture of life continues. So the bigger theme here, I'll come back to that now, but the bigger theme is half of life is death. That's what life, reality, the universe is. Yin and yang, black and white, positive, negative, male, female, all that. Life and death. So life isn't just about life, and all death and suffering and tragedy and misfortune is unnecessary. It's not to be callous, but that is part of life. So we can't continue on the trajectory of we need to stop killing or harming everything. Of course there's a middle ground, because like I say, it's correct to understand that things are sentient, and that it's not good to take the lives of other things unnecessarily. There's that word again, unnecessarily. In the grand scheme of life, something somewhere is dying for the sustenance of something else, and there's only so far we can go with that. So you might become a vegetarian or a vegan, and I've got no problem with that. That's my chosen life preference in the main. I'm not stuck in it, I'm not rigid with the boundaries, but being vegetarian, saving animal lives, lots of life is still killed to maintain vegetable crops. You know, the huge tractors that plough the fields for vegetables actually take more life than, say, for example, a grass-fed, you know, raised on the pastures cow. Which, okay, it's one life. It's raised for food, but it's one life that goes, as opposed to the hundreds, thousands, if not millions of smaller life forms that get damaged to maintain vegetable crops, and the ploughing of those. So it's an uncomfortable but necessary thing to point out that there's always life forms on the receiving end of suffering to sustain something other than itself, and that is the big picture. Where we draw the line, who knows? But coming back to the original point, it's the uncomfortability and unwillingness to accept death, that death is a thing, suffering is a thing, that leads to some choices which can't be sustained. So take for example as well, humans intervening in natural ecosystems. So because of our compassion and empathy, which again is correct and valuable, and God, we need more of that, but because of that we notice the suffering and we might intervene. And they've done studies where humans have intervened in feeding a species that may seem to be, I don't know, dying out, or they may restrict the growth of certain animals so that others can flourish. And time again the studies show that the consequences of that further down the line are negative. The balance of nature is in a bigger sense is always upset. So they've done stuff like taking out a wolf population of an area because of its killing of other animals, and it's just causing problems as we see it. And then they've had to reintroduce wolves then, when they've realised many years later on that the wolves and what they've been doing in killing other animals or whatever it is was necessary for the bigger picture to be sustained. So you've got this unusual situation where we feel the pain of other living beings and we try to intervene to stop that because it's not nice. But really, like, upon inspection, are we doing it for them, or are we doing it to resolve an uncomfortable feeling in ourselves because we feel pain when we see other beings suffer? And then it comes into the territory of human relations, psychology, problem solving, counselling, and codependency. So codependency, people take on a controlling nature, largely because of a discomfort with the way situations may transpire, which might be negative, where people might be worse off, people might suffer, people might feel pain, whatever it might be. So you get a lot of over controlling, people intervening to stop that happening for other people, or coming in to fix. Now, if you're in the world of counselling, psychology, or anything of that nature, and you're familiar with how to empathise, how to actively listen, how to just be with someone, say for example when they're presenting problems or in a problem, you'll know that offering solutions, trying to fix is not the answer, and it's not what's required. So again, it comes from this root of the discomfort that we feel at the prospect of others suffering. Now, of course, that's not to say that we should be fine and okay and happy when other people suffer, but it's got to be somewhere in the middle. It's got to be from an understanding that suffering, misfortune, tragedy, death is all part of natural life and has to actually take place to some degree. When you truly want to help people or listen or empathise, what you learn in these different fields is that you have to let people have their pain without rushing in to fix, to control it, to try and take it away. And that active, like, listening and empathy is the right balance, So it's not being callous, saying I don't care about your pain and that there is suffering and walking away, or even resenting someone for their suffering, which is the other extreme. But it's not being unaccepting of other people's suffering, and to please our own discomfort and our anxiety, or to resolve that, stepping in and trying to fix. So this is another area where you can see how our cultural attitudes towards pain, death, suffering, tragedy, misfortune leads to behaviours which ultimately are not sustainable. They don't sustain the bigger thing or the localised individual thing. So there's lots of different examples that seem apart from each other, that actually upon inspection you can see that it lifts the lid on how uncomfortable we are with all of the negative side of the spectrum, with ultimately the taboo of death. So yeah, always a laugh on these little talks. So I'm glad I cheered you up with that one. But that's what's been going on for me the last few days. A few thoughts around that topic. You know, please contribute if you'd like to. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you'd like to help with taking the content to other people who might enjoy it, and much appreciated. See you in the next one.